town had been hollowed out by a storm the summer before. Roofs peeled back like envelopes, porches hanging on by nails. And for a while, the little inn on Maple Run was a refuge for people who had nowhere else to go. I worked nights there, the kind of overnight shift that makes you part nurse, part concierge, part unpaid therapist. 6 in the evening until 2 in the morning, then someone else took over while I went home to sleep until my next day. The inn was small, only a handful of rooms. A paint-faded front desk with a bell that sounded like it belonged in an older movie, and a back staff room with a tired sofa, a coffee machine, and an employee bathroom that I used when the long hours bled into one another. That night, the inn felt smaller than usual, quieter somehow, the kind of quiet that tightens your throat. I was in the back room when a voice cut through the hush from the lobby, low and deliberate, calling hello over and over until the word took on the weight of a thing. I pushed the door open and leaned over the counter. Behind the glass divider, a man stood at the desk, his face half-shadowed and his shoulders too still for someone who wasn't supposed to be there. There was a 10-inch slot beneath the glass where we passed things through. He said he needed towels. I slid a couple of bath towels under the opening and watched him take them. He snatched them with a motion that was almost a jerk, then gave me a look that rested in my chest like a cold stone. He walked away down the hall, rubbing the towels over his face as if trying to scrub something off. On the monitor, I followed him. He peered into doorways, his head tilting like a thing listening for more than sound. Then he stepped into the elevator. I told myself to shrug it off. People are weird when they're traveling. But the motion of him rubbing those towels and that look stayed with me. 10 minutes later, the same voice came again, louder this time. He was back at the desk, pressing his palms flat to the glass. "My keycard's broken," he said, but when I asked for his room number, he answered with nonsense. "Room number 12B. But our system only had numbers. That should have been the end of it. A misunderstanding, a confused guest. But instead, he threw the towels to the floor and stepped up close to the glass until his breath fogged it. He tilted his head like an animal considering you, then smiled in a way that didn't match any human smile I trusted. When his face was nearly pressed to the pane, he said, soft and certain, "I'm going to kill you." At first, I thought I'd heard wrong. Then he said it again, louder, and the next time it swelled into a sound that was almost a scream. My heart thundered in my throat. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers and held the receiver between my shoulder and ear, my thumb hovering over the bell as the man paced toward the exit. He mocked me through it, laughing like someone reading a joke they wrote themselves, then drifted out into the night. The dispatcher asked if I wanted an officer to respond. By then, he had vanished into the dark, and I told her no, trying to steady out the fizz of terror under my skin. The rest of that shift stretched thin. I stayed in the lobby until my relief arrived at 2, watched the empty corridor, watched the closed doors. When I finally stepped outside into the parking lot, the air punched at my face with cold. I had only a light jacket and my hands shoved into pockets, my breath like thin ghosts. Somewhere in the hedge that hid the ground floor windows, I thought I heard a noise. I kept walking. The town at that hour was a small animal, slow and silent. For a moment, I walked on the main road with nothing but the sound of my shoes on wet pavement, and then I turned onto a residential street that would take me home. It was so quiet that every sound seemed too loud. An owl calling, the scrape of a branch. Then behind me came the unmistakable scuff of someone running. Not the long, thudding run of someone sprinting, but the quick, padded tiptoe of someone trying to be unnoticed. I turned. The sound stopped. A car parked just behind me made my stomach drop. I didn't need to see anyone to know the voice that had lodged under my skin earlier. Laughter drifted from the hedge, soft and wrong, and then the same sentence, low and deliberate. "I'm going to kill you." The laughter was close now. I looked for the nearest house with a light and ran for it. slamming my palm against the doorbell until someone woke and opened up. I remember the grip first. Hands like iron closing at my throat, pressing the air out of me as a whisper hissed in my ear, "Die." I thought, truly, that the world was splitting into a handful of bright images. Faces I loved, a sky I'd never seen before, the smell of my childhood kitchen. But then a man in the doorway screamed, loud and raw, at the figure holding me, and the hands released. I fell to the pavement, gasping, while the attacker retreated and melted into the dark without a shape to follow. The neighbor, an ordinary man in pajamas, hollow-eyed from being startled awake, dragged me into his kitchen, handed me a paper cup of water, and dialed the police with steady hands. He stayed with me until the officers arrived and took my statement. They pulled the CCTV from the inn and said they would circulate the footage. For a week, I held my breath every time my phone buzzed. A few days later, I was called down to the station for a lineup. They herded me into a room with 5 men standing in a row and told me to pick out the person in the footage. For 5 minutes, I stared and strained until my head hurt, trying to match memory to face. Under that fluorescent light, none of them looked like the thing that had been at the desk. None of them matched the mouth that had been pressed to the glass, or the half-mad smile I'd seen in the parking lot. My hands were sweating. At some point, I must have doubted myself. When the officer asked, I said I didn't recognize anyone. I still think about that choice in small, sharp ways. I hope I was right, that the man on the tapes was a different person. But sometimes I worry that fear scrambled me, or that something else did. The police said they would follow leads and try to locate him, and I tried to believe them. I changed my route home after that. I kept my phone in my hand, thumb on the emergency dial. I slept with the lights on for nights that became weeks. The inn kept its bell and its little staff room, but whenever the lobby quieted a certain way, I felt the memory of those towels sliding beneath the glass, of breath fogging a pane, of that smile as if a loose tooth had been a missing street light. My name is Lila, and I worked the late shift at a low-key bar on the edge of town, the kind of place that sits half hidden behind a line of maples and a forgotten strip of asphalt. It's a bare-bones joint, a battered jukebox that plays the same 3 records on loop, a handful of regulars who lean on stools like old habits, truckers rolling through, and the occasional lost traveler who needs a drink and directions. There's a rear entrance that opens onto the neighborhood, and on weeknights I closed alone. Just me, the taps, and the soft hum of the neon sign. The money was fine, the work predictable, and I thought I knew the rhythms of the place well enough to sleep at night. One slow Tuesday after midnight, he walked in. He looked out of place for our little strip. Too clean, too neat. Think dark turtleneck tucked under a long coat, hair cropped and tidy, posture that suggested he'd never known rough work or late-night worry. He sat at the bar like someone who owned the room for a moment and ordered the top-shelf whiskey without hesitation, watching the bottles with a kind of mild, clinical curiosity. He spoke softly at first, polite in a way that put you at ease. He asked me if I liked working there, the kind of question that sounds small until it turns into something else. We talked for a while. He had a way of tilting his head and smiling that made the conversation effortless, and for a second I let myself be flattered. The world at 1 a.m. can be oddly trusting. Then, out of nowhere, he asked if I'd ever wanted something bigger. It was a weird question to spring on a bartender, but he asked it like it had a flawless answer, like he already knew me better than I did. When I shrugged it off as a joke and told him I was fine where I was, he drained his glass, laid a crisp $100 bill on the counter as if it were nothing, and walked back into the night. I thought I'd never see him again. A week later he came back, but he didn't come alone. A woman I'd never seen before sat beside him, dressed sharp and rehearsed, trendy in a way that didn't quite fit, like someone practicing the look she wanted to keep. She smiled, too bright, touched my arm with a finger that lingered and said, "You're so pretty." It was a compliment that landed like something calculated, and the touch felt measured. She asked me the usual questions at first: how long I'd worked there, how old I was. Then, with that same too-sweet smile, she told me she ran an exclusive event club and was always looking for fun people. $10,000 for a weekend, she said, low and casual as if naming a lunch prize. I laughed it off and tried to be polite, but the words kept landing wrong. She circled the idea, promising safety and exclusivity like a salesman repeating a slogan. When she suggested I step outside to meet someone who could explain it better, my stomach gave a cold little twist. I said no, blunt and flat for the first time that night. For a moment, her pleasant mask slipped, almost invisible, a small tightening around the eyes. And then the bar door opened as other customers came in, laughing and ruining the moment. They left without pressing. I told the manager. We all agreed to keep our guard up. He said he'd be nearby and the cameras would help. It felt like enough. A few nights later, I left after closing and felt watched. A car sat across the street, engine dark, headlights off, a hulking shadow against the wet pavement. I kept my head down, keys in my fist, and the quiet of the small town stretched thin around me. The car followed, always a few blocks behind, patient and impossible to catch. I tried to outmaneuver it, ducked down side streets and looped around a gas station, and finally pulled into a police station lot with my knuckles white on the wheel. The car peeled away into the dark, and I sat there for longer than I care to admit, my heartbeat loud enough to make the hood of the patrol car tremble with every echo. For a while, I thought that might be the end of it, but the story didn't stop. One slow weeknight, just me at the bar, wiping down the rails, the front door creaked open and I saw her, the woman from before, slide in and take a seat as if she belonged. I sent a text to my manager, casual and furtive, and tried to act like everything was normal. She ordered one drink, smiled that smile, and leaned like she owned my attention. I turned to make the cocktail and the front door clicked shut behind her. When I looked up again, she was gone. Through the glass of the entrance, I saw a black van idling at the curb, engine muttering. I locked the door reflexively, but metal rattled at the van's rear, like something testing a latch. My pulse drummed in my throat. For the first time in a long while, the bar felt small and brittle. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a steel shaker, and dialed 911 with my free hand, listening to the rattle turn into pounding on the rear door, a staccato meant to flush me into view. I thought about a run for it, about bolting into the night, but something in me braced instead. I waited with the shaker and the phone and the humming neon. And for a terrible moment, the world was reduced to the squeal of tires and that small, sufficient fear. Headlights cut into the dark and a car pulled into the lot. It was my manager. The sounds at the back door stopped. The van peeled away with a screech and left gravel embedded in the mouth of the street. My manager hugged me like a parent would, furious and frightened, and told the officers what he'd seen. He'd caught the van's plate number as it left. When the police reviewed our security footage, what I saw on that grainy screen made my blood run colder than anything else had. Two figures, faces masked, crouched near the front steps as if waiting for me to step outside. Another figure banged at the rear door, trying to drag me into the dark. They were coordinated, practiced, and the whole thing had been set up like a patient, ugly trap. The plate we recorded came back unregistered. Days stretched into weeks while police checks and leads turned into static. No arrests, no answers. The worst small mercy was that my manager stopped scheduling me alone. Someone is with me now when the night deepens and the jukebox cycles into that same 3 songs. But the old confidence I felt walking to a closed bar evaporated. I find myself scanning parked cars now, counting exits and thinking about how they might have known my schedule. Sometimes I imagine what would have happened if I'd stepped outside that night. Sometimes I think about the way the woman's hand felt on my arm, the way her smile didn't reach her eyes, and how easy it is for a polite question to turn into a plan. The town kept its slow routine, the neon hummed, and I still pour drinks with the same hands, but the background thrum of safety has a notch missing now. My name is Mara, and I work the overnight stocking shift at a sprawling discount store called North Vale Mart. Nights there stretch like a rubber band. The same fluorescent buzz overhead, the same linoleum reflecting dull rectangles of light, the same quiet sigh of the HVAC. After months of doing it, you stop noticing time and start noticing small things. The particular way the game consoles are arranged, the faint perfume someone leaves in the headphone display, the way the clearance rack always smells faintly of old cardboard and lemon cleaner. I liked the electronics aisle because it was a little island of calm in a place that otherwise hummed with fluorescent indifference. People don't rush in at 2 a.m. to buy chargers and Bluetooth speakers. The customers who do show up are usually truckers or people killing time, and that's when you can see the odd ones. He was the sort of odd I noticed at first as a shape in the corner of my eye. A man who kept appearing whenever I looked up. Never shopping, never pretending to. He would be a pallet over, lingering by the outlet cables or near the clearance shelf, always just far enough to be noticed, but never close enough to be polite. At first I told myself I was being paranoid. Stores are big. Maybe he was browsing. But there's a difference between browsing and positioning, and his posture felt like intention, telescoped, patient, like a creature learning when to move. I tried to radio for backup, but the handheld was dead. The little green battery icon had long since gone red, and the mesh of dead batteries felt absurdly like bad luck. I debated finding a manager when a hand settled on my arm so suddenly that the breath left me. She said my name like we were friends. Warm, casual, the kind of voice that makes you blink because the tone doesn't match the moment, and smiled as if we'd met at a holiday party. Her grip was firm and oddly familiar, and for a second I was flattered into stillness. Then she said it low and urgent, close enough that I could smell the citrus of her perfume. "He's been recording you. Follow me." I turned slightly and saw him again, closer now, no longer pretending to look at earbuds. He was staring straight at me, expression blank as a camera lens. A cold wash of panic rolled through me. The woman's hand tightened and she steered me away, keeping the act of casual conversation alive as she pulled me through aisles with the practiced ease of someone who rehearses the mundane in front of unsuspecting witnesses. Her voice kept the cadence of small talk, a joke about a trip, a memory that may not have existed, and I let myself be led because the alternative seemed worse, alone with a man who watched like a fixed camera. The store shrank into a corridor of suspended light and stacked boxes as she moved me toward the back. Every time I thought she'd drop the pretense and reveal herself as an ally, she stayed in character, smiling too bright, sliding her words into the air like a net. At some point, I glanced back and breathed a small, grateful breath. He was gone. I told her we were fine, that I'd grab a manager, that this was ridiculous. She squeezed my arm and smiled in a way that no human smile should hold, too steady, too patient, and said, "Just a little further." The words were thin. My skin prickled. The warehouse section loomed ahead, high metal racks, the cold blue flicker of exit signs, low light that swallowed faces. Beyond that was the employee side exit, the unmonitored door we used for receiving shipments. The one camera coverage didn't reach, and the one that always made me think, uncomfortably, about the hours we kept. The moment it slid into place, I saw the plan like a film strip snapping into focus. She was guiding me to a door with no cameras. Her hand never loosened. This was no rescue. It was a choreography I hadn't agreed to. I tore my arm free and the motion felt like breaking a twig. She called my name behind me in a voice that tried to sound disappointed and coaxing at once. "Come back, Mara." The sound of my own name in her mouth, when I had never given it to her, landed like a cold stone. I ran for the front of the store, and I screamed until my throat felt split. One of my co-workers, who must have heard the panic in my voice, came rushing, and I gasped the nonsense out. He called security, and they met me with steady, professional faces. The woman and the man were gone, evaporated like breath in the vents. Security pulled camera footage, and my stomach fell as the images scrolled. The films showed them entering together, the two of them walking as a single, quiet unit. He moved with that same blank focus, and his face was clear in the pixels. Steady, watchful, the kind that photographs like evidence. She kept her head turned in every frame. I watched 1, 2, 3 times. Her hair, her coat, the way she shifted her weight. Always a profile, always the face away from the camera. It wasn't a blur or a trick. She had simply positioned herself so that whatever angle the cameras retained, her face never registered. It had been planned, down to the frame. Police arrived and took statements. They called it a failed abduction attempt, filed reports, and told me they'd follow leads. The certainty I had the first night, that someone had been watching me for a long time, hardened into something worse. Someone had picked me out deliberately and had learnt my patterns. The part that keeps me awake is not the image of his face caught on camera, though that's chilling enough. It's the quiet little fact that the woman knew my name, pronounced it like it belonged to her. Days pass, and the police say they're working it, and I keep waiting for a call that closes the loop. Instead, there's only static and a slow shrink in the margins of my routine. I walk the store differently now. I count exits in my head. I tuck my keys between my fingers and keep my phone ready. The electronics aisle, once a quiet island, has become a place of lines and angles that can hide a watchful pair, and I find myself noticing how someone can fit a plan into a smile. The worst part is the realization that being chosen wasn't random. It was deliberate, and that knowledge sits behind my ribs like a small, persistent noise I can't tune out.